All right, let's dive right into this explainer and begin our investigation into an ideal that promised literally everything but ultimately delivered total devastation. Today, we're going to treat this analysis like a literary and socioeconomic autopsy of the American dream. We're exploring exactly how a cultural promise of prosperity transformed into the engine for some of literature's most heartbreaking tragedies.
Before we get going, here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the flawed American dream, the modern tragic hero, capitalism and commodification, symbols of a failing mind, and finally, the cost of ambition. The really crucial question we're answering today is why the ultimate promise of American prosperity created such profound disillusionment and ruin.
So, Section 1, the flawed American dream, diagnosing the disease. Let's zoom out for a second and examine the macro environment that infected society in Arthur Miller's classic work, Death of a Salesman. Because, to really understand the tragic downfall of a character, we first need to understand the environment that poisoned him in the first place.
Now, what's really interesting here is our academic anchor for today. We aren't just summarizing a play. We're actually unpacking a peer-reviewed sociological and Marxist critique. We're drawing specifically from 2025 research by Dr. Gazde Begum Mizrak in the Eurasian Journal of English Language and Literature. This is going to ground our analysis in a robust academic examination of how capitalist ideology commodifies identity and relationships. So we're going way beyond just a simple literary summary here.
To understand the disease, we first have to look at the baseline of health. What was this dream actually supposed to be? Well, historian James T. Adams actually coined the term back in 1931. He defined it as a promise of a better, richer, and happier life for all citizens of every rank, built entirely on the foundation that hard work and diligence would unlock ample opportunities. It was an ethos built on merit, freedom, and equality. Sounds pretty great, right?
But looking at this schism, it's wild to see the stark contrast between those original ideals and the corrupted, highly materialistic reality that emerged, especially in post-war America. Our protagonist, Willy Loman, completely bought into this corrupted version. The economy shifted from being production-oriented to consumption-oriented. Instead of valuing actual hard work and comradeship, society and Willy himself began to value outward appearance, consumerism, and the incredibly superficial trait of simply being well-liked. Willy fundamentally believes that charisma, not diligence, is the ultimate currency.
Moving on to Section 2, the modern tragic hero, the infected patient. Shifting down from the societal level, we're now focusing our lens on the working-class common man who internalized this totally corrupted dream.
It is absolutely fascinating how Aristotle's ancient frameworks for tragic kings map so perfectly onto a Brooklyn salesman. Take hamartia, the fatal flaw. For Willy, it's his stubborn refusal to accept that success requires actual hard work rather than just a smile and a shoe shine. Then there's hubris, his excessive pride. He's completely destitute, borrowing $50 a week, yet he is way too proud to take a legitimate job from his neighbor Charlie. And finally, anagnorisis, the tragic realization. He slowly discovers that despite all his hot air, his sons, Biff and Happy, really haven't achieved anything. It's this flawless translation of classical tragedy right into a modern, middle-class living room.
Arthur Miller literally revolutionized literature with this exact sentiment. He showed us all that an ordinary guy fighting for his personal dignity, terrified of losing his place in the world, can fall just as hard and evoke just as much pity and fear as a monarch losing an entire kingdom.
All right, Section 3, Capitalism and Commodification, the Transaction. Let's pivot slightly to the economic reality of the post-war era and basically conduct a Marxist autopsy of Willy's career to see exactly how the system broke him. This is one of the most iconic, truly heartbreaking quotes from the play. It captures that sudden, devastating realization. After giving over a quarter of a century of loyalty to his company, Willy is unceremoniously fired by his boss, Howard, simply because he's no longer highly productive. He realizes that corporate capitalism has basically consumed his youth, his energy, the fruit, and is now just discarding the peel.
We can really break down the systemic mechanics here. Looking through an academic Marxist lens, capitalism creates profound alienation, which is a worker's total estrangement from the very labor they perform. The system extracts a worker's surplus value, treating human beings mostly as cogs in a profit-driven machine. Decades of loyalty, they mean absolutely nothing in a transactional society where your intrinsic human worth is equated only to your financial success and your output.
You know what's absolutely fascinating here? It's the central metaphor of the transaction.
It hit me that we, the audience, are never actually told what specific product Willy Loman sells. It's an empty signifier, and that is entirely intentional. Willy isn't just selling goods out of a suitcase. The ultimate commodity he is selling is himself. He sacrifices his personality, his freedom, and ultimately his life, offering his whole self to be completely consumed by the market.
Section 4. Symbols of a failing mind, the psychological symptoms. Now we're stepping right into the claustrophobic reality of Willy's backyard to examine his mental breakdown as these capitalist pressures just crush him.
Notice how this builds into just one of the most surreal, tragic scenes in modern theater. Jobless, drowning in debt, and just abandoned by his sons at a restaurant, Willy goes home and starts frantically planting seeds in his garden in the middle of the night with a flashlight. First off, it's a literal manifestation of a provider who has nothing left to give. He complains he doesn't have a single thing in the ground. Second, it's a metaphorical cry for legacy, this desperate attempt to nurture new life after realizing he instilled all the wrong values in his boys. And third, it represents his suppressed, true desire to work with his hands out in nature. It's this haunting spectacle of a disintegrating mind, which prompts his son Biff to look on in horror and mutter, "Oh my God."
Here we see this powerful juxtaposition. You've got Willy's natural romanticism up against his completely crushing environment. He loves the grand outdoors, just like his father and his brother Ben, but he forced himself into this city salesman role because he was seduced by the promise of easy wealth. Now, his home is quite literally boxed in by concrete apartments. There's no sunlight, and he complains there isn't even a breath of fresh air. As he says, they massacred the neighborhood to build apartments. But really, it's his soul that's been massacred. That's why planting those seeds is so futile. The audience knows nothing can grow in the darkness of that urban trap.
And finally, Section 5, the cost of ambition, the Gatsby foil. For our final chapter today, let's bring in a strategic foil to prove that this capitalistic disease isn't just some working-class problem. It affects both the common man and the ultra-wealthy elite.
By looking at Willy Loman side by side with F. Scott Fitzgerald's J. Gatsby, we uncover something pretty incredible. While Willy is seeking basic financial security and his son's love, Gatsby has immense wealth but seeks the aristocratic Daisy's love and upper-class acceptance. But despite their wildly different bank accounts, both men share the exact same fatal flaw. They are victims of what researchers actually call cruel optimism, meaning they are hopelessly devoted to an idealized past and a completely unattainable fantasy.
I mean, Gatsby threw these massive, flamboyant parties. He amassed an absolute fortune, but we quickly see why it just wasn't enough. Gatsby's immense wealth couldn't overcome the rigid class barriers of the Jazz Age. Daisy represents old money. That's inherited privilege that you are born into, not something you can earn. To the elite like Daisy's husband Tom, Gatsby will always just be a bootlegger, Mr. Nobody from Nowhere. It proves that the meritocracy of the American dream is fundamentally rigged. It promises equality, but ultimately preserves the very class boundaries it claims to dissolve.
To wrap up our explainer today, I really want to leave you with a thought that jumps straight out of the 1920s and 40s, right into our present day. When you consider our modern gig economy, the relentless hustle culture, and the way we literally brand our own identities online for profit, are we still selling our souls to a dream that was never even in stock? I want you to reflect on your own relationship with success and really ask yourself if you're driving your life by your own true values or by the exhausting illusions of the market. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the narrative.